So for the past few months, you've probably been besieged with emails and Facebook posts asking you to convince our politicians not to cut public funding for the arts. Often these appeals will include a link to some news story about how the arts will suffer if government grants are reduced. And if you click through and read the comments, invariably you'll come across something like this. The government, at whatever level, has no business funding the arts, especially so when much of that art is mediocre or worse. Why should my tax dollars go to fund the fun of someone who thinks himself or herself the next Picasso? Exceptional art will find funding as it always has. In my arts policy coverage, I find this argument comes up a lot, and there's a good reason. It's difficult to parry. Our first response to such arguments is usually to talk about the value of the arts. But note that the commenter is not saying that art itself doesn't have value. The dispute is about the value of subsidy to the arts. The commenter claims, and quite rightly so, that art would still happen if the government didn't help pay for it. In fact, that's exactly what took place in this country for the first 175 years or so of its existence before real infrastructure for government funding came into being. So why would we want to subsidize the arts anyway? I mean, if the deli on the corner is losing customers because its meats are stale and the service is terrible, we don't say that the government should subsidize the corner deli. We say good riddance. So is it really such a big deal if the arts are left to fare for themselves? The way I see it, there are basically two reasons to subsidize the arts. One, to give us cool art that the market wouldn't otherwise support, and two, to give access to the arts to people who wouldn't otherwise have it. Each of these reasons assumes a market failure when it comes to the arts. The first suggests that while the market can determine which art or entertainment makes people happy in the moment, it is bad at judging the long-term value of art. It's pretty easy to come up with examples of people who we now consider to be great artists who were not recognized as such in their day. The only reason that their work has survived until now is basically sheer luck. Often, an artist's real value to society comes not so much from the direct experiences that audiences have with their work, but rather from the profound influence that the artist has on other artists, some of whom may eventually reach a wider audience. The second reason to subsidize the arts is a straight-up class argument. Just because people shouldn't be denied access to the art just because they're poor or happen to live in a rural area or are confined to a nursing home or a mental institution. The same argument applies to kids. Just because their parents can't afford to provide them with access to art doesn't mean that they shouldn't have it. I'm going to focus most of this talk on the first argument, that it's important to subsidize art because the commercial marketplace is not good at judging art's long-term value to society and future generations. So we agreed that the commercial marketplace is not so good at judging the long-term value of artistic product. But if you're not going to let the marketplace decide who succeeds and who fails in the arts, then who should decide? To be honest, I don't have a great answer to this question, but the best that I can come up with is that I would want the people deciding to really know their shit. I figure if someone who's studied the arts, or even better, my specific discipline, or better yet, my specific genre and subgenre within my specific discipline, will have a better idea of the long-term value of my work to society than some schmo off the street. That's not elitism, that's just common sense. But you know, art is still a matter of taste, and people always have personal agendas and scores to settle and so on. One of the really nice things about the commercial marketplace is that no one person really has that much power to determine what happens on their own. But the problem with the commercial marketplace is that most of the people in it are not the experts that we want judging the long-term value of the work. So what we need is something that I call an artistic marketplace, a system of buying and selling artistic products and services in which the currency is not money, but instead the respect of experts, in which success is determined not by how many butts and seats you have or how many records you sell, but the extent to which your work impresses people who really know their shit. So who are these people? They are anyone who experiences a lot more art than the average person, and thus has a basis for informed opinion. Professional critics are probably the most obvious exemplar of this category, but it also includes anyone who judges artistic work samples for a living, like publishers, artistic directors, booking agents, record company execs, gallery curators, and the list goes on. It even includes, I would argue, people like this guy. These people collectively form the demand curve within the artistic marketplace. As we said earlier, the currency of the artistic marketplace is the respect and endorsement of experts. The problem is this: the respect does not exchange properly with the currency of the commercial marketplace, money. This is important because the whole purpose of subsidy is to make that exchange possible. Remember, with subsidy, we are actively intervening in the commercial marketplace because we don't agree with the choices that it's making about which artists and institutions should stand the test of time. And yet I'm sure that any of us in this room, or any of us watching, can point to examples of brilliant artists working today who are well recognized by their peers, who nevertheless struggle to make ends meet. This wouldn't happen if the artistic marketplace were functioning the way it's supposed to. So why is it that philanthropic subsidy isn't more effective at helping critically acclaimed artists make a living? Well, for one thing, we can't talk about this phenomenon without mentioning the intense competition for attention between artists of all stripes. I don't need to tell you that the last 20 years have completely revolutionized our society's level of access to art of all kinds. Production costs have fallen drastically, making it possible for amateur creators and performers to use equipment that only professionals could have taken advantage of a generation ago. And because of the internet, distribution costs have nearly disappeared entirely, particularly for film and electronic media, recorded music, and writing. Finally, storage costs, with the transfer of so much information to digital format and hard drive capacities metastasizing every year, are dropping through the floor as well. The net result of all these changes is that it's easier than ever for people to create art that can pass for professional. It's easier than ever before for these amateur artists to enter the public sphere by distributing their works to the world, and these works get preserved in the public sphere instead of languishing in somebody's attic or in the creator's imagination. Bottom line, a lot more people are entering the artistic and commercial marketplaces on the supply side. They engage in personal creation or performance for public consumption. And because the same technological innovations apply to retired artists, even deceased artists, not only does each new playwright or a composer or a painter have to compete with all her peers, she must also compete with every artist who came before her. Unfortunately, she cannot similarly count on dead audience members to be a part of her fan base. So there's a tremendous amount of competition in the artistic marketplace, a marketplace in which the currency is respect. But in order to get respect, one of the experts in the artistic marketplace has to give you their attention, which means that they have to give you their time. They have to listen to your piece, read your play, look at your slides, be present at your audition. And time is becoming, for all of us, a really, really scarce resource. Our lives are being filled up, not least by all this content that we're bombarded with every day. In fact, we are producing so much art in the world these days that we are overwhelming the human capacity to process it all. Let's say you're a music fan. If you wanted to listen to all of the albums released in the United States in a given year, say 2008, you could put your headphones on for every hour of every day of every week of the year, and at the end of it, you still wouldn't have gotten through more than an eighth of them. So now it's 2009, and you still have 7/8 of the previous year to listen to, plus all of the albums from 2007 and the albums from 2006, and well, you get the idea. Or let's say you enjoy hunting for videos on YouTube. Guess what? There are 35 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. That is the equivalent of 176,000 full-length Hollywood movies every week. So you see what I mean when I say that we don't have the capacity to evaluate it all. And more to the point, the experts in the artistic marketplace don't have time to evaluate it either. So they triage. They take some shortcuts. Let's take an example from music, since that is the world that I know best. If you review the rosters of major classical music presenters around the country, you'll start to see a lot of the same names over and over and over again. The fact is, the first instinct of anyone awarding a high-profile gig will be to choose proven commodities, names that audience members are familiar with, excited by, and motivated by tickets for. there's a powerful incentive for these curators to make that choice. It's called earned revenue. Even though presenters operate in the artistic marketplace, they also operate in the commercial marketplace, and the commercial marketplace demands that one take advantage of star power. But let's say that in this particular case, a presenter has decided to take a chance on a chamber ensemble that is not so well known. In fact, it's the first gig they've ever had at this level. But are they really unknown? For that programming decision to happen, the work of those musicians has to be brought to the attention of whoever is doing the artistic programming for the presenter. I'm telling you right now that it didn't happen because that person was reviewing unsolicited work samples that came in through the mail or over the internet. The tidal wave of submissions is in all likelihood so massive that they can't possibly give their full attention to each one. So what do they do instead? They're probably plugged into the next level down of presenting opportunities, and they may get out and see shows on a regular basis. They monitor what their peers are saying in the local community and around the country about particular artists, keeping an ear out for those that are generating buzz. And it is on this basis, career momentum essentially, that programming of new artists actually happens. So for an unknown chamber ensemble to get a major opportunity like this, they have to already be generating buzz and getting smaller performance opportunity. Here's where it gets tricky. Those smaller performance opportunities don't really pay the bills. Maybe the musicians are self-presenting and thus see their income swallowed up in production costs. And maybe they're doing a lot of unpaid gigs as favors just to get exposure. They might even be doing club shows where the payout at the end of the night is $50 a musician if they're lucky. That doesn't go very far towards paying for instruments, practice space, or van rental if they're on tour. And how did they get those smaller gigs anyway? It certainly helps if they had a killer demo, the kind that it takes money to record. It helps if they had a lot of time to practice together, which means they had a dedicated rehearsal space. These things cost money. And finally, in all likelihood, these musicians paid a lot of money for conservatory training at the bachelor's and possibly the master's level. And during that time when they were getting trained, they probably weren't making money either. So we've just outlined a number of problems standing in the way of an unknown artist or group of artists getting a gig that pays them enough money to live on. There's a problem of profile. In order to get that gig, people have to already know who you are. The problem of curatorial capacity. In order for people to know who you are and to stand out from the crowd, you need some career momentum. The problem of presentation. In order to get that career momentum, you need public showings and documentation of your work, which you have to either pay for or subsidize. And there's a problem of uncompensated time. In order to make those presentation opportunities successful, you need to spend thousands of hours in training and practice, which are thousands of hours that you're not earning a living. Do you see where I'm going with this? This process of getting attention presents us with a huge class issue. Is it any mystery why our arts organizations have trouble connecting with less affluent members of society? It's not because they can't afford the tickets. It's not because they can't get to the venue easily. It's not because the genre as a whole isn't relevant to them. Okay, I lied. It is all of those things. But I don't think that any of them are the main reason. I think the main reason is that these less affluent populations don't know anyone in their communities who is a professional artist with these organizations. Because how could you be? If you grew up poor and you couldn't afford conservatory training and you weren't given lessons in school, and anyway, now you have to work 2 jobs to put food on the table and feed the kids. We talk a lot about cultural equity in the arts, and we typically frame it in terms of audience access. Who has the opportunity to see one of these amazing artists perform or witness their creations? But as more and more of us turn to creative expression as a way of affirming our identities in an increasingly connected world, I think the most important cultural equity issue of our time isn't who gets to see the amazing artist, it's who gets to be the amazing artist. I've almost reached the end of my time, but I want to leave you with a few thoughts about where to go from here. One of the big problems with the current system is that of all the experts that we identified way back in the beginning of this talk, only a few of them can back up their opinions with more than token amounts of money. I gave you the example of a presenter earlier, and others, such as grant makers and some artistic directors, share that privilege as well. But that leaves out most critics, booking agents, radio station programmers. It leaves out superfans and aficionados. Doesn't their opinion count too? Well, apparently not, if you follow the money. What we need to do is pretty clear. First, because supply in the artistic marketplace is increasing so dramatically, we need to bolster the demand curve to meet it. By getting more people who really know their shit to evaluate unknown artists. This will address the problem of capacity. And second, we need to do a better job of making sure that the people who know their shit can back up their opinions with money, so that those who succeed in the artistic marketplace can also succeed in the economy more generally. In Audiences at the Gate, an article published in Edward Clapp's 20 Under 40 anthology last year, Daniel Reed and I discuss, who's in this room, discuss a model that aims to accomplish both of these goals. We suggest that one or more foundations could funnel some of the money that they give to the arts each year anyway through a community of citizen curators who interact with each other via a web-based platform. These citizen curators could be anyone really, but their influence on the foundation's decisions and thus their ability to direct the flow of philanthropic capital would depend on their ability to build a reputation among their colleagues for knowledgeable, fair, and thorough evaluations of proposals and work samples uploaded to the site. This approach increases the number of people participating on the demand side of the artistic marketplace, and it explicitly directs philanthropic subsidy into the hands of experts. And there's a third advantage as well. By consolidating discussions about which artists deserve support into one place, the model transforms curation into a team effort, avoiding needless duplication and saving everyone precious time. I'm sure there are other approaches that might work too, but I do believe fervently that we need to do something. As it stands, because the artistic marketplace isn't functional, less affluent individuals get shut out, and we don't get a chance as a society to benefit from their talents or perspectives. Thus, the first goal of artistic subsidy, cool art that we wouldn't otherwise get to see, is not fully met. But if you'll recall, the second purpose of artistic subsidy is to give people access to the arts who wouldn't normally have it. And we've just said that access isn't just about experiencing art as an audience member, it's also about getting to be in the show. So if we can someday reform the artistic marketplace, we'll actually be serving both goals of philanthropic subsidy at once. Not to mention addressing the most important cultural equity issue of our time. Not bad, right? Let's just hope that our government funding survives until then.